Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're talking about something pretty wild, lie detectors. Specifically, a paradox in U.S. law that creates two totally different sets of rules for American workers, and it all hinges on one single law with a massive exception.
So let's just get right to it with a simple question. Can your boss make you take a lie detector test? Now, you might think you know the answer, but trust me, it is way more complicated than it seems, and it really opens up this fundamental split in American law.
And boom, here's the paradox right here. If you work for a private company, the answer is generally a hard no. But if you work for the U.S. federal government, especially in a job related to national security, the answer is often, yep, you bet. So what is going on here? Why the huge divide?
Well, it all circles back to one specific law, the Employee Polygraph Protection Act of 1988, or EPPA for short. This piece of legislation is right at the center of this whole debate.
The EPPA is actually pretty straightforward. Basically, its main job was to stop private companies from using lie detectors on their employees, whether they were trying to get a job or already had one. You see, Congress passed it because there were huge concerns that the tests weren't reliable and that bosses were abusing them.
So for most of us, this law gives you some really concrete rights. Your employer can't force you to take a polygraph. They can't fire you just because of the results, and you absolutely have the right to say no. The bottom line here is that if you're in the private sector, you've got strong protections.
And this, right here, brings us to the heart of the controversy. Because the law sets up what you could call a tale of two workforces, where each group plays by a completely different set of rules.
I mean, it gets right to the core of the fairness argument, doesn't it? If Congress decided these tests were too unreliable to use on, say, a retail worker, then why on earth are they okay to use on an intelligence analyst? Critics say it's a textbook double standard.
And just look at this breakdown. It couldn't be clearer. A private employee? You can refuse the test. A federal employee in a security role? Good luck with that. Private workers are protected if they say no. A federal worker's career, on the other hand, can be completely derailed by one failed test. The difference is just, wow.
And this is where you start to hear some really serious legal concerns. People can face career-ending consequences based only on these polygraph results. Critics point to the fact that the interrogation tactics can get really coercive, and countless qualified people have been turned away from jobs simply because they couldn't pass this one test.
Okay, so beyond the whole fairness issue, there's an even more basic problem, the science, or maybe the lack thereof, behind the polygraph itself. This is where we move away from legal arguments and into cold, hard facts.
And this, right here, is the absolute key thing you have to understand. A polygraph machine is not a lie detector. It cannot read your thoughts. All it does is measure your body's stress responses, your heart rate, your blood pressure, how much you're sweating. But here's the catch. A million things can cause stress, and lying is only one of them.
Hey, don't just take my word for it. Back in 2003, the National Academy of Sciences did a huge review of the technology, and their conclusion was, well, pretty damning. They said polygraph screening has, and I quote, serious limitations, especially for the kind of broad, catch-all screening the government uses it for.
I mean, just think about it for a second. A perfectly honest person who has an anxiety disorder could easily fail. Someone with PTSD could have a huge physical reaction to intense questions. Heck, just being terrified of the test itself can make you look deceptive. The results can be all over the place.
So if the test is so flawed and the fairness argument is so strong, why in the world does the federal government get a free pass? Well, there is a reason, and it's a big one. National security.
Yeah, this is really important to get. This wasn't some kind of accident or a sneaky loophole. When Congress wrote the law, they intentionally wrote in an exception for federal agencies that deal with national security. It was a 100% deliberate choice. So why'd they do it? Well, the argument from supporters is that in these really high-stakes jobs, the polygraph is a useful tool. They claim it can scare off potential spies, help dig up security violations, and, maybe most importantly, get people to admit to things during questioning that they would have otherwise kept secret.
And all of this leaves us with this huge, unresolved conflict. It's that classic balancing act between two really important values that often seem to be pushing against each other. It really boils down to this, doesn't it? On one side, you have the fundamental need to protect the rights of employees from a technology that science says is, frankly, pretty shaky. But on the other side, you have the government saying it needs every tool it can get to protect national security. Where do you possibly find the balance? Now, some people have proposed a kind of middle path. The idea is, okay,
let agencies keep using the polygraph as one part of their screening process. But, and this is a big but, you bring in the same kinds of protections from the EPPA. That would mean someone couldn't be fired or denied a clearance based only on a polygraph result, without any other actual evidence.
And that really is the question we're left with. There's no simple solution here. This whole thing is a debate about where we, as a society, draw the line between security and individual rights. And it makes you wonder, how do we keep the country safe without undermining the rights of the very people we ask to protect it?